My name is Silvia Forni, ROM's Senior Curator for Global Africa. I'm delighted you could join us for today's Curator Conversation, a digital program that explores themes and subjects from ROM collections alongside industry professionals. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the ROM sits on what has been the ancestral land of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Anishinaabe Nation, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, since time immemorial to today. My guest for today's program is award-winning artist Camille Turner. Born in Kingston, Jamaica, and now living between Toronto and Los Angeles, Camille's work combines Afrofuturism and historical research. Most recently, she has been unraveling the entanglement of what is now Canada in transatlantic slavery. Her interventions, installation, and public engagements have been presented throughout Canada and internationally. Camille graduated from the Ontario College of Art and Design and York University's Environmental and Urban Change program, where she has just completed her PhD. She is currently a Provost Postdoctoral Fellow at the University of Toronto Daniels Faculty of Architecture, Landscape and Design. Camille Turner is the recipient of the 2022 Toronto Biennial of Art's Artist Prize, awarded to recognize an artist's outstanding contribution to this year's presentation. We will have some time at the end for your questions, so please submit them via the Q&A feature on your screen, and we'll get to them at the end of the conversation. But without further ado, because we have a lot to talk about, I would like to welcome to this space Camille Turner and start our conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Silvia.
Hi, Camille. Actually, Dr. Turner, I should say. Very exciting. So, yeah, I mean, you've recently been recognized in the city of Toronto for your outstanding work. So maybe let's start from there, going back. You know, if you could tell us a little bit what kind of explorations you engage with the work Nave that has just been presented at the Toronto Biennial, and how did you get there?
Okay, thanks, Silvia. So I will start by showing you a few of the pieces that led up to Nave. The work that I'm doing is grappling with what Christina Sharp refers to as a past that is not past. And here in Canada, this past is covered with an opaque, thick silence. And so I'm part of a group of Black artists in Canada that are doing the research and creating works that unsilence this past. So the first piece I want to talk about is Wanted. Next slide, please. Yeah, so Wanted is a series of 10 images that I created collaboratively with Kamal Purbai. And we began with advertisements that were found in newspapers, 18th century newspapers from Upper and Lower Canada and the Atlantic coast. And these ads offered rewards to hunt down people who resisted enslavement. And these are posted by Canadian slave owners. Now, the people, we saw them as freedom fighters, but in these archival ads, they are framed as wanted criminals. So we drew on the descriptions of clothing in these ads, and we had models wear contemporary versions of these clothing, and we transformed them into fashion ads. And we wanted to make the people that we found in the ads larger than life. We wanted to honor them. We presented them as living in the future places of possibility that they must have been conjuring as they made their bid to struggle for freedom. All right, next slide. The next piece is called House of Bobby, and it's another collaborative work with Kamal. And this piece is hanging at Union Station right now. It'll be there till September. It's a monumental piece, the largest piece that we've done together. It's a lenticular image, and it depicts 18 of the Black and Indigenous people that were the property of the Bobby family of Toronto, Windsor, and Detroit. And if any of you've been to Hyde Park, there's Bobby Point, that's the same family. This was an estate that they owned. So we use lenticular photography to combine different frames into one. And as you move past the image, you see people emerging from the blur of the crowd, emerging and disappearing. And that really speaks to the ephemeral nature of memory and the difficulty of excavating a history of people who were never acknowledged as part of humanity, but were only listed as property. Next slide. And then this is the Afronautic Research Lab, and it's a project that was created and activated by Outer Region, which is a group, a performance group that presents perception altering experiences. And it includes my sister and brother, Lee Turner and Karen Turner, who are here in this photograph with me. We invite participants to explore suppressed and silenced evidence of the past. So this is our reading room here. This was the very first one that we did at U of T, but this project has traveled across Canada. And we have now started exploring physical space. And we just did a project for the biennial, exploring both the archive and the physical space. Next slide. So Nave basically is an artwork that was commissioned by the Toronto Biennial of Art. It's a meditation on the silence history of 19 slave ships that were built in 18th century Newfoundland for the transatlantic trade in Africans. And the work came out of several years of conversations with biennial curators, Katie Lawson, Tyrone Bastien, and Candace Hopkins. This piece is also part of my PhD research, which, as you noted, Silvia, I just completed, yay, at York University's Faculty of Environmental and Urban Change. I was supervised there by Dr. Honor Ford Smith. But the seeds of this project were actually planted in 2014 when I journeyed to Dakar, Senegal, where I met you, Silvia. I kept going back to the door of no return on Gorée Island. And this is one of the places along the west coast of Africa from which Africans were abducted and trafficked across the ocean as cargo in the holds of ships. And I stood at the door and I'm gazing across the Atlantic, and I felt, at the time, I knew nothing about the slave ships. I just really felt like I was on a journey. And I had no idea where it was going to lead, what I was going to find. I just knew I was on a journey. A couple of years later, I got invited to Newfoundland by Pamela Edmonds and Bushra Junaid to participate in an exhibition called Newfoundlands. And this exhibition explores the entanglement between Newfoundland and the Caribbean. And Bushra is a Newfoundlander of Jamaican and Nigerian heritage. And she's been doing this work of connecting the dots with her own family history and looking at this history for a long, long time. And she generously shared her research with me. For me, the most curious piece was a document giving evidence of a ship called the Sarah. And the Sarah was made in Newfoundland. And this really triggered so many questions in me. How did the ship come to be made in Newfoundland? And I knew that I wanted to investigate it further. And a few years later, I got my opportunity when I was invited by Catherine Beaudet to participate in the 2019 Buena Vista Biennial. And for this biennial, I decided to just go further into the Sarah. But my partner, Winston James, who's a historian, encouraged me to consult the Slave Voyages database. Now, I didn't expect to find anything, but I thought, okay, I'll look. Well, there were 18 more ships in that database that were built in Newfoundland for the transatlantic trade, and 3 more built for the intra-American trade, which meant trafficking people between colonial sites, mainly in the Caribbean. So, so the work that came out of this engagement for the Buena Vista Biennial is called Afronautic Research Lab Newfoundland. So in addition to the reading room that you saw in when I showed you the slide from Afronautic Research Lab, I also created a film. So basically, in the film, you see this character here. She's a time traveler. She hails from the future that she refers to as the Age of Awakening. And this is a time of liberation and freedom that it was forged when the past was acknowledged and reckoned with. And I performed this character who comes from the future and arrives in our time. She calls the Age of Silence. And here in this frame, you see the time traveler with a rock that she found in West Africa. The rock was originally from Newfoundland, and it traveled to West Africa as ballast on a slave ship. And these ships were in the 18th century, they were built to carry a load. In the absence of the load, they had to be ballasted so that they could sit properly in the water. And that would be done with anything heavy, soil, dirt, rocks. But when the ship pulled up to the West African shore, the ballast would be dumped out to make room for the people, the ship's intended cargo. So the time traveler finds the rock in West Africa, brings it back to Newfoundland as a witness to this entangled history and geography and this silence crime of the past. Okay, next slide. And here she is in the reading room. So she's assembling the evidence, and people would come and sit around this very table that she's at and looking at all of this evidence. So Nave is the continuation of this engagement. In Nave, the time traveler enters the nave of a church, and she performs a ritual to honor those who were in the holds of the ships. Many of Newfoundland's oldest churches were built by shipwrights. They were the first builders of the town. So looking up into the nave of these churches is like looking down into the hold of a ship. So basically, I flipped the meaning of nave to use it as a container for Black memory. And what you'll see in this piece is on the shore, there's an ancestral figure that emerges from the water. She sings a song in Haitian Creole, and it's reminding the African diaspora of how far we've come on this journey of resistance of our ancestors, of our resilience and our survival. Next slide is an excerpt, a very small excerpt of Nave. All righty. And so there's just one more piece that I created that was a part of this trilogy here, and it's called Sarah. And it's a piece that emerged from this research on ships that is an intimate portrait of myself as a descendant of those who survived these ships, which brought people from Africa to the Caribbean, including Jamaica, where I was born. And these ships could be the very ships that brought my ancestors. So I contemplate what it means to be doing this research amidst a global pandemic, in the wake of the public lynching of Black people, including George Floyd. So while I was creating this film, there was a video of spaceships that was reported by USA military that was released by the Pentagon and broadcast widely by mainstream and social media. So I created the character of an Afronaut who comes from the future and returns to Earth in one of these spaceships. So she's a descendant of Black people who left Earth in 21st century when it became unlivable for Black life. So to give their descendants a fresh start on another star, their historians decided not to tell them about the past. The problem is nobody could figure out what they saw in their dreams. So the Afronaut comes to 21st century Earth seeking answers, and she learns about the past by observing the researcher who's bombarded by current media reports of Black people targeted by gratuitous violence. And she learns about earlier histories by watching the researcher do the work of recovering knowledge of the slave ships. Now, you never see the Afronaut. She's the narrator of the piece. So I'm just going to play 1 minute of Sarah.
She's searching for the story of Sarah, a ship built in 1789, long before space travel was invented. Unlike our ships, Sarah can only travel on water by catching the wind. We learned that Sarah was a slave ship, and there were thousands of other ships like her. We were astonished to find out that 12.5 million people were abducted and trafficked across the water on these ships. At first, we thought perhaps the people who were stolen had been returned to their homes, and we hoped that those who had committed the crimes had been brought to justice. But as she assembled the evidence, we found answers to our questions.
All righty, so that is the story of what I'm doing right now.
That's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing this. I mean, I've seen Nave at the Biennial, and it's, you know, at its best in a dark room with large screen and the haunting music and soundtrack that accompanies it, and the sound of the ocean. But already from, you know, seeing it on the screen, you can see how just haunting and touching in many ways, and inspiring that piece is. So really, thank you for sharing it, and for sharing Sarah, whom I have not seen, and I look forward to seeing in its gallery presentation when it comes. Well, I guess since, you know, we still have a few minutes to talk, maybe we can talk about, you know, where do you see this journey taking you next? Because you've done all this research, you somehow produce these videos for your dissertation work. How do you see this research continuing, or in which directions are you interested to go now?
Yeah, I've been so blessed to have been awarded a postdoc at U of T. I'll be working with Barbara Fisher as my supervisor, and I'm continuing this work towards a solo show at the Art Museum at U of T. So I'm really excited about that. While I was doing this work, there were so many pieces that came to me, so many ideas that I wanted to do that I didn't have time to do for my dissertation. And also there's so much work to be done. While I was doing the work, I wasn't able to go back to Newfoundland, for instance. I really wanted to go and just immerse myself in the space. Again, space is so much of an important part of my exploration. Just being in the space, there's things that you can learn about or know in your body that you cannot know just from an archival engagement. You know, I couldn't have made the work I did if I hadn't been to these places. So I want to go back, and I want to go into the archive there. So there's a lot of work to do. And yeah, so I'm really excited to be invited to continue the work and to unfold more of the vision that as it comes to me.
Yeah, that's really incredible. And okay, so I mean, I guess we could maybe see if there are questions from our audience and see where this take the conversation. So for all of you in the public, if you have questions for Camille that you want to share, please put it in the Q&A feature of Zoom so that we can look at it and respond. So there is an anonymous attendee that is asking, how might educators invite students to respond to your work while ensuring that students' creative response are not contributing to further erasure?
We have this, and thanks for asking that. We have this amazing teacher's guide that Kamal and I engaged with two historians, Natasha Henry, who is a curriculum consultant, and her work is amazing. She's also the president of the Ontario Black History Society, but she created this incredible guide for teachers, and you can find it on our site, kamalandcamille.com. So this resource is available. And Brett Rushmore is another historian who contributed to this guide. So Rushforth, sorry, who contributed to this guide. So I think this is a really great resource for teachers. Yeah, so I hope that helps.
Yeah. Okay, so Theodora Nandi is asking, when will the exhibition be realized? As the exhibition, I guess, at UOT about all this work.
Yeah, it'll be 2024. Yeah, so that's what we're heading for, 2024 in the fall.
Yeah, and I guess maybe this is my curiosity. Will it be mostly video, or what do you see as the most effective media to use in these types of explorations? Because you've also used a lot of performance and just direct engagement with people. So how do you see this exhibition unfolding in terms of what we would like to realize?
Yeah, I think there'll be a mix, really. It's incredibly powerful for me when people actually come and physically engage. And so these kinds of engagements, I think, are definitely going to be a part of it. And as the question, the person who sent the comment about teachers' engagement, that is going to be a part of it as well, because I'm very interested in engaging with the public, engaging with educators. I'm an educator myself, and I'm really interested in giving the tools and information to educators so that they can use the work in what they're doing. But yeah, I really love the immersive quality of video. It was the first time that I was able to realize a piece of this kind of heft, you know, and I don't get those, I didn't get those kind of opportunities before. So I'm so grateful to the Toronto Biennial for this opportunity to be able to unroll this vision. And yeah, so I'm hoping to do more work like that. It was very exciting to be able to roll that out. Yeah, so I think it's going to be a mix of all kinds of different media.
Yeah. Okay, so there are a few other questions that have popped up. An anonymous attendee is asking, did you encounter resistance, significant or otherwise, and or ignorance about Canada's seldom discussed, seldom taught, uncovered history?
Yeah, that is a constant. And, the resistance takes form in so many different ways. For instance, in Newfoundland, I kept being asked about, and I'm blanking on the name now, but there's a story that they really like to tell about a Black mariner that was rescued by very kind Newfoundlanders, and it's a beautiful story, but it's the only story that gets circulated about Black people in Newfoundland, as if that is all there is. And so I kept getting that story over and over and over. And that's part of the erasure, is the circulation of, you know, this story to the exclusion of everything else that kind of stands in for, you know, all that's not being said. But I've been doing this work for, gosh, I guess about a decade now. I'm just thinking, when did this start? Yeah, it's about a decade. And I just remember going to an archive and an archivist basically saying, well, there's this shame that he personally had, and that is the reason why he doesn't engage with this kind of work. So I get all kinds of things like that. There's shame. There's, you know, another librarian said, oh, well, I'm so sensitive. I just can't do this. You know, so there's these kind of things. It's this kind of painting, repainting Canada as innocent. And then there, you know, and I'm always shocked too when I find, you know, more pieces of the puzzle, but, you know, why this shock just comes from the lack of information that circulates and the way that this story just keeps getting overwritten. But yeah, the shock is kind of part of that innocence, you know, as well, that and the way that the story just keeps getting rediscovered.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, the national narrative of the Underground Railroad is also another powerful but positive way in which Canada likes to look at its entanglement with slavery, more than the preceding.
Oh my gosh, that's for sure. There's a really good documentary, CBC doc by Kyle Brown. I was one of the participants. Afua Cooper was one of the participants. Oh my gosh, it's such a good piece. And you see how the Underground Railroad narrative just gets, you know, it's uncovering Canada's slave secret. I think it's called, but you can see how strong and powerful that Underground Railroad myth is, and even like Canadian politicians that just don't even know and don't want to know about this history. Yeah. Of enslavement and this entanglement, as if Canada just kind of sprung out of nowhere. And, you know, is this benevolent place that has nothing to do with, you know, those terrible people from the South.
Yeah, no, for sure. I guess this is a question related. I mean, you mentioned education guide connected to your work, but I guess also thinking about this broader histories. For students who are interested in learning more about this topic, what are the other resources they could look into that maybe cannot do the deep dive in the archive that you can do?
Yeah, no, well, there's so many books, for instance. Afua Cooper, Carolyn Smarts-Frost, and Adrian Shadd wrote a book, for instance, called, I think it's called The Underground Railroad Last Stop Toronto. It goes beyond the Underground Railroad, because this is where I first encountered information about Peggy Pompadour, for instance, who was enslaved in the former town of York. And so it's a really good resource, and it's a children's book, but it is a really good start. It lays out a lot of ground that I've used as a foundation for, you know, some of the explorations that I've done. So that's a good place to start. There's some really amazing books, Marcel Trudel's books, for instance. He did a really deep dive into the archive. He basically looked at the French Canada. He looked at the churches and baptismal records in French territories that became Canada. And he counted something like 4,200 enslaved people. So this is available as a book. But there's another contemporary version of the book, and I think it's called 200 Years of Slavery, something like that. And it's written by Trudel as well. That's what else? Oh, there's so many books. And there's so many artists doing the work. Nadine Velsen, for instance, who's doing some amazing work. She just did a projection of, you know, the Gladstone Hotel. Gladstone was one of the biggest slave owners in Guyana. Bushra Junaid did an amazing exhibition at the Rooms, and it was looking at writing Newfoundland into the Black Atlantic. Charmaine Nelson has the Center for the Study of Canadian Slavery that just started at NASCAD. So there are so many resources that are available, and people doing this work.
That's amazing. It looks like we have a class of grade 8 students who are attending. And so some of the questions that I read so far actually come from them. And Katie is asking, what do you enjoy most about your career?
Oh my gosh. Wow, Katie, good question. I think I get to be creative. I get to, and I feel like all of us start off creative. A lot of us get sort of, I don't know, to feel that, you know, this isn't a valid career, but it is a valid career. And it's amazing to be creative. You know, I create for a living. I get to engage other people. I get to see other people's responses. And that's really exciting to me. And I get to engage with these stories. I'm telling stories with my work. So thanks for that question. I love what I do, and I feel very blessed to be able to do it.
And I guess this is another question from Haley, also in grade 8, that asks, what keeps you motivated when times are difficult or get difficult? And this also comes to another, maybe I'll read that other question from Akil that is also asking, he often wonders, when identity is part of the work of racialized artists, do you ever feel pigeonholed? Or do you find the work exhausting ever and wish you could explore non-identity focused work? I mean, it's not really the same question, but I think it all touches upon, you know, how hard this work is and how emotionally tasking it is to uncover these histories. What keeps you going?
Yeah, that is very true. Thank you so much, Haley and Akil, for those questions. I think what keeps me going is knowing that the work has to be done. you know. I feel like the work I do acknowledges those who came before me. It, you know, I feel like these are ancestors who were never written into human history. They were never counted as a part of human history. And so it's really important to me to honor them, to acknowledge them, to let them know that they have not been forgotten. So that is really, really what keeps me going. And Akil, the pigeonhole, yes, that does happen for sure. But I feel like there's something bigger at stake, and that is, you know, the work has to be done. And so I just open myself to be the vessel for that work that has to be done. And it is, you know, there's a lot of emotional labor. The piece, Sarah, that I just played a little bit of, that really shows the emotional labor. And that is a piece that really did not come from me consciously deciding to create this piece. The piece almost created itself. I would have dreams, you know. I would wake up with a storyboard in my head, you know, and it was just this kind of exhaustion. And honestly, when George Floyd was killed, that was a huge exhaustion for me. I just felt like curling up in bed and just wake me up when we're free. You know, that's how I felt. But I realized that, you know, I need to double down and actually do the work. While there are people interested in the story, I need to act now. I need to keep going. I need to do the work. And so, so basically, I just, you know, dragged myself out of bed, and this story just came out of that. So yes, the work is hard. It's very emotionally draining, and that is, you know, a part of it. I have many stories in me that are not connected, you know. And there's so much. I mean, I want to go back to painting, for instance. I haven't painted for a long, long time. There's so much I want to do, and hopefully I will do that. But while these stories are urgent, I have to keep working. So thank you for that.
That's wonderful and so important. I guess a couple of other questions from the St. Matthew's class. Audrey is asking, do you have any advice for people who are interested in looking in their own heritage? And I guess really more of a methodology question. And Aaron is asking, did you think you would explore this subject when you were younger?
Oh boy. Oh boy. Aaron, yours is easier to ask, to answer. No, I had no idea. I had no idea this even existed. Honestly, this is all kind of unfolding in real time for me. So no, I never ever thought that this is what I would explore. I think as you know, when I was young, I always wanted to be an artist, but I don't even know if I sort of could conceptualize the kind of art that I'm doing now, or that you know, that it was even possible. So yeah, so that kind of hopefully answers what you asked. Audrey, what advice? I think it's really important to speak to people in your community, speak to people who, you know, who are doing the work already in your community, because I'm sure that you're not the only one. But I think it's really important to have a community of people doing the work. And so, you know, find that community and join the community, learn from them. And yeah, sometimes it's hard to know where to start, isn't it? But I think finding a community is a really important way in. Yeah, so I hope that answers your question.
Akil was also asking, what do you do for fun?
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I love to travel. I love to travel. That is one thing I love doing, and just traveling to peaceful places. Costa Rica has been one of my favorite places so far. So it's been really lovely. Just the nature all around you. I love it. Yeah. So thank you. And that's an important question because it is heavy.
It
And
is heavy.
you have to do things that bring you joy. You know, joy is so important. Yeah.
So Rachel Roy has two questions that one I think is she's wondering if you're working with other artists or artist collectives to do this work.
Yes. And that has been one of the joys. I showed you Afronautic Research Lab with my brother and sister. Like, that's been so much fun. I'm really glad that, to be able to work with my siblings. And Kamal Pirbai is another amazing collaborator. So we have a website, Kamal and Camille, just launched not long ago. So check it out. Some of the work that we've been doing together, and we're very, very different people. When we get together, there's crazy, Kamal has all kinds of crazy ideas. And I love that because I would probably never even think about some of these ideas. So it's really nice, the synergy when two people that are very different come together, and what you create just kind of transcends anything that each of you could do separately. So that's been really fun. And in the past, I've had many other collaborators. One of my most cherished is Cheryl Larondelle, who's a Métis, Cree Métis artist. And we did this amazing collaboration called Freedom Tours. So we recreated a those boat tours in Gananoque, those very colonial boat tours, but we recreated it from Black and Indigenous perspectives. It was an amazing, amazing experience working with her to do that. And then we did a walk along Rouge Park with children from the area, from Scarborough. It was a walk for Mother Nature. Standing up for the animals and birds that we want to protect. It was an incredible experience. So I love collaborations. I love working with other artists. Alana Bartol in Windsor, Ontario. That was one of the very first projects that I did. In this kind of looking at these histories. So we looked at the history of Bobby House, for instance, and Francois Bobby House, and it was an incredible experience. Talk about resistance. That was the time when Francois Bobby House did not have anything about the people that who this museum is named after being slave owners. And so it kind of forced them out of hiding and out into actually having to say something, to make a statement. And so I'm really excited now that the curator there has decided to investigate further. So I'm looking forward to what will come out of Francois Bobby House. I'm looking at you, Francois Bobby House.
That would be great. And it's amazing when your work can have these ripples. So you're not the only one doing the work, but other people also add other pieces to this very tasking and complicated work.
There's also, I just wanted to say, Afua Cooper has been amazing as well. She's the person who sort of initiated me into this work. And I just want to acknowledge her. And she, in fact, I wouldn't have known about Francois Bobby House, the Bobby family being slave owners, if it wasn't for her dissertation. I read her dissertation and that's how I knew. So when I'm walking by that house, I'm like, oh, there's nothing about slavery here.
Yeah.
And so that's why I decided, okay, this is where I'm going to do my residency. Yeah. That's
great. Rachel Roy is also asking if at this point, if your U of T exhibition is going to travel elsewhere in Canada to other Canadian venues.
That is the dream. That's the dream, Rachel. This is what I want to do. It would be fantastic to be able to travel this exhibition to other places. So yes, it's my hope and my dream. Putting it out there to the universe.